Hi, my name is Kuenzi, and I'm a retired counselor in Oregon. And today I'm going to talk with you about cultivating emotional wellness and ways that we can be proactive about mental health, especially as the winter months are approaching. Um, Many people in the world are struggling with mental health during this pandemic, so it's an especially challenging time for many families around the world. And I just want to share some personal experiences. As I said, I'm a retired counselor, and so I have a background in working with people concerning mental health and also other aspects of health and disabilities. But I've also had some personal experience in the past year with going through some depression and anxiety myself. And I just want to share some things that I learned during that time. But first, I want to share a little bit of background. I enjoy traveling, and I taught at a medical college in China when I was younger. A couple of years ago, a friend and I traveled to China to do some workshops for counselors and doctors. When we were flying to a remote part of China for a few days of rest, we flew in a medium-sized plane that hit some major turbulence while we were flying over a really big lake on a cloudy day in Yunnan province. The plane shook rather violently, and a lot of people were white-knuckling it, and things were kind of flying around the cabin. First, we heard an announcement in Mandarin from the pilot. And then, in a very kind, tender voice, in English, I heard these words: "Dear friends, please have a seat and fasten your seatbelts. Please don't be afraid. We are experiencing some bumpy times right now, but we will take good care of you. Our captain will safely guide us to our destination soon." So, despite the bumpy way that the plane was just shaking in the turbulence, I relaxed when I heard this stewardess's words. Despite the very bumpy ride, I felt reassured. Today, I want to help you to relax a bit as you consider your own mental health on this bumpy journey we call life. We're going to talk about ways that you can take good care of yourself, whether you are experiencing depression and anxiety or other mental health challenges, or you're a bit concerned about what might happen to you in the coming months or years. And when you pack for a trip, sometimes it helps to have a master packing list so you don't forget key things. I have multiple sclerosis and I've lived with this for decades. So sometimes when health gets a lot worse for a period of time, and in the midst of these challenges, it's not always easy to remember crucial things that have helped me in the past. So I created a master packing list in case of MS exacerbations. I included things that I really need to remember, and this has been a helpful tool for me. So just like when you pack your suitcase, I created a list of things that I know I need to keep in mind during tough times with health. Today, we're going to talk about how to be proactive about our mental health. In a sense, we're going to create a master packing list so that we'll remember key things that help us during tougher times with mental health. I live in Oregon, and our winters are especially dark and often rainy. So a lot of people here suffer from seasonal affective disorder, and I'm among those people. When I worked as a counselor, I helped people plan ahead to avoid getting really depressed or anxious during these dark winter months, or to deal with it when they did get depressed or anxious. I'm human too, so I've learned that I have to plan ahead and have a routine as well. This means that I need to get adequate sleep and exercise every day. I need to take advantage of daylight whenever I can, and I need to do life-giving things and notice my stress levels. So before I get into practical things you can consider as you maybe develop your own packing list, I want to share a brief story from a book called Sleeping with Bread, Holding What Gives You Life, and the children's version by the same authors, which is called Making Heartbread. During World War II, many children were orphaned or separated from their parents. And this is in Europe. Since their homes were destroyed, many of the children wandered through the streets and didn't have anyone to take care of them. They were often hungry and didn't have a warm place to sleep. So naturally, they were really scared. These kids eventually were found by adults who took them to refugee camps. Many of these kids still couldn't sleep very well, even though they had food and were in a safer place finally. Why? Because they felt anxious because they still didn't know if they would have what they needed the next day. Maybe you can relate to this in terms of your own mental health. So, back to the story. The adults tried to reassure the children, but the kids found it really hard to relax and trust. One of the grown-ups had a good idea. He saved some bread from supper. At bedtime, he gave each of the children a piece of bread to hold. The children's book describes it this way: holding the bread next to our hearts, we could finally sleep in peace. All through the night, the bread reminded us, today I ate and I will eat again tomorrow. We could sleep without feeling scared. We had learned how to hold tummy bread next to our hearts until it turned into heart bread. Heart bread had turned the scared place in our hearts into a safe place in our hearts. I really like that book. And I'm just thinking, as I think about my own life, I need reassurance that I'm going to have what I need tomorrow also. And so I sleep better when I know that I've been able to plan ahead a bit and know that I'll have what I need to take care of myself. So I want to ask yourself, what things increase your own anxiety levels or make you more prone to depression or other mental health challenges? What does your heart need to feel safer and as though you have what you need? If you have PTSD, what things trigger you? Have you sought healing for some of the deeper things that get triggered during stressful times? Nowadays, the treatments available for PTSD are much more effective. One of these treatments is EMDR. EMDR is a trauma technique that doesn't require a lot of reliving of the trauma, and it can be very effective. There are also some faith-based healing approaches, which I really like too. At the end, we'll talk about a few of these things and some other resources, but I want to help you think about some practical things that you can do on your own to give you a better chance of having more emotional stability. So we're going to look at being proactive about mental health wellness. Let's take a look at what you need to cultivate and to maintain emotional wellness during the winter months. Ask yourself, what helps you take care of your mental health? What helps you become more resilient? Just like the children slept better when they held a piece of bread close to their hearts, what do you need to hold close to your hearts to reassure yourself? Last winter, I went through a really tough time with my own emotional stability. I had never experienced a major depression like this, so I have a whole new empathy now for people who struggle. My hormones were off, sleep was terrible for about 4 months, and I found myself in a very dark place for a while. Anxiety levels got really bad, and that's usually not a really big struggle for me. I even wished at times that I didn't have to keep living, which was for me a new and very painful experience. I have helped many people over the years who were having suicidal thoughts when I worked in counseling. I helped them get the help they needed from the crisis center and other resources. But I hadn't really experienced that myself until this past winter. I learned some things from this hard experience. These lessons have become part of my master packing list as I prepare for the winter ahead and the years ahead. And they know that when people who go through a major depression or struggle with anxiety, there's a higher incidence of experiencing that again in the future. So that's why I took time to really pray and think about what things do I need to do so that I can have the best chance at emotional stability this winter and in the years ahead. So I'm going to share with you some of the lessons and things that helped me through this tough time. I had a few close friends who I opened up to about my struggles. At first, I felt embarrassed to admit that I was hurting so much emotionally. I guess maybe because I'm a counselor and by background, and quite honestly, our culture really does still have a lot of stigma about mental health. And, you know, if you broke your leg, you wouldn't hesitate to go get an x-ray and do what was necessary to heal that leg. But we're often afraid to talk about mental health as openly, but we need to change that. And that's one reason I'm doing this talk today. And I'm writing a book called Tenderly Transformed. and it's about mental health in times of crisis. But my hope is to reduce the stigma associated with mental health so that people aren't afraid to ask for help. So for me, being honest with a few good friends was really important, and it helped keep me safe. One of my friends called me almost every day, and my husband learned how to better support and encourage me. But I had to be honest with him first, and it was tough. It was tough on our relationship, stressful for him, and he was going through his own health issues. So it was a really challenging time for us. One of my close friends, she happens to work for the psychiatric unit at the hospital, but like me, she has a master's in counseling, and she came over to visit me once a week. And the thing that was really helpful about time with my friend was that she herself had gone through a major depression earlier in her life that lasted, I think if I remember right, a couple of years. And so it was really very helpful to have her and another close friend who shared with me what she had been through years ago and how she got through it and how she had recovered and kind of, rebuilt her life in a sense. So some of the things that I ran into is my friend Martha would come and help me fix lunch, and that just spending time with a friend, even if we didn't talk, was comforting and helpful. I really didn't like being alone all day while my husband was at work. And this friend, Martha, called me almost every day. During this time, I stopped wanting to go outside. I didn't even really want to take a shower, to be honest. I started being anxious about leaving the house, but having support from a few friends and my family really helped a lot. I know that not all of you have a strong support network, but that's something to develop during better times so that when the turbulence hits in your life, you have some other reassuring voices besides that voice inside your head that isn't always helpful. One term I want to mention is anhedonia, and that's a term that describes this kind of loss of pleasure. I mentioned that I didn't, usually I love to take a hot shower. It feels good and it's relaxing. But when serotonin is depleted, these kinds of things don't feel appealing anymore, and people stop wanting to do these self-care things. So I found a mental health nurse practitioner who could help me consider ways to recover. And I'm really thankful that I found this help. And one of the things that he said is that suicidal thinking is like the sneeze to a cold. It just goes with it. And oftentimes people seek help when they begin to have suicidal thoughts. But it's really, really important to get help because you don't want to risk your own safety. And being accountable to a friend or two if you're having those kind of thoughts, and getting some professional help is wise and very important. My friend who's a counselor reminded me that depression will tell us to withdraw, and it always distorts the truth. So does anxiety. She told me that even though it would be hard, I needed to try to do the opposite of what depression or anxiety told me to do. For instance, depression would encourage me to pull the covers over my head and avoid life by staying in bed. But getting up and getting dressed, taking a shower and going for a walk, or riding my exercise bike, or even like coloring or doing something life-giving and joyful, even if I didn't feel like it, would be far more helpful than pulling the covers over my head. So that became something that it's very hard to do when you're in a major depression, but doing the opposite of what depression is urging you to do is one of the best ways you can help yourself. It also helps if you can take walks, go to bed the same time, get up roughly the same time every day. It helps set your circadian rhythms, and that can be helpful. I stopped wanting to eat, and so I lost weight, but a healthy diet can really help with mental health. So as I look ahead to this winter, I know that for me, avoiding sugar and inflammatory kinds of foods and eating whole foods gives me the best chance that I have to do better. Last winter, before I ran into that turbulent time emotionally, I guess it was last fall really, we had a lot of major life stressors. We lost a beloved family member abruptly. My husband had some major health issues, and my own health I mentioned that I have multiple sclerosis. The disease has been progressing in some really challenging ways, but I didn't really know how to process all of that right then. I just felt overwhelmed. We also had a lot of changes in our extended family, so I was helping some with parents' needs and some life transitions for them. So I started to feel really overwhelmed around Thanksgiving, and I decided to pull back and conserve energy. However, I made a serious mistake. I stopped doing the things that I love, those things that are life-giving to me. So usually I swim and I do water exercise. And during this time, thinking that I was conserving energy, I dropped my gym membership. Well, that was a big mistake. Usually I love writing, but I stopped writing and I stopped meeting with the other authors on Zoom every week or two. And that usually is a very wonderful source of support and encouragement in my life. But I thought mistakenly that reducing stress by, stepping back from writing and doing the things that are really that I have a passion for, I thought that would maybe help my stress levels. But instead, it cut me off from the things that are life-giving. So, and I also normally love photography, and this helps me to capture the beauty that God's created and be mindful and practice gratitude. So I stopped roaming the countryside with my camera. I stayed home more and I became uneasy going out. Also, the pandemic hit. And so we had stay-home orders here in Oregon, as many people around the world had. And my husband began working from home, which on one hand was extremely helpful because he was home and his presence was comforting to me at first. In fact, it really helped me to begin to recover, to not spend as much time alone. However, after a while, that became a stressor to us because we weren't used to being together 24/7. So I want to mention a few things. Living with MS, just as it is challenging for you who maybe live with some mental health conditions, living with MS is quite challenging. And the incidence of depression and anxiety are fairly high in diseases like MS. But really, life hits turbulence for all of us. So we need to learn to do things that are life-giving and energizing. We need to decrease the things that deplete us or drain our energy. In the book I mentioned at the beginning, called Sleeping with Bread, the authors teach people how to do an old spiritual practice called the Examine. The title used to be Consolations and Desolations, but this practice can be easily incorporated into your daily life and it's really helpful. So I'm going to just explain how to do this. And it's something that you can do regardless of your faith or spiritual background. So on a piece of paper, just simply make two lists. On the left, list things that are life-giving or energizing. On the right, list things which are depleting or draining to you. So for instance, I might list that today, something that's life-giving to me is that later I will get outside and I will plant some succulents. And I'll go to a local little sale where some of my succulents are going to be offered for sale. I have found that gardening is really life-giving for me. And so is, for me, time in the Word, time in the Bible, and time with other Christians who I can find fellowship with. And I'm also a person who really benefits from one-on-one time with another, like a close friend. The pandemic's made that a lot harder for a lot of people, and there's a lot more isolation, which really lends itself to people getting depressed. So find ways besides Facebook and social media. That's really not, it's kind of an artificial intimacy. What we need is real face-to-face connections with others. And we need to make eye contact with someone who cares about us, because that's actually good for our brain health and our emotional stability. So just an encouragement to you. List the things that are life-giving or energizing. And for me, like I said, one-on-one time with a close friend, that's life-giving. Now on the other list, I want you to list things that are draining or depleting to you emotionally. Now, for me, it's definitely draining to spend too much time in front of the computer or scrolling through social media. It's kind of an empty, or watching the news. These days, watching the news isn't really great for our mental health, is it? I try not to watch a lot of news. I get my news from other sources because I don't want a lot of negative or violent images in my mind all the time. For me, it's helpful to avoid that. So under life-giving, I try to do things that give me joy. Under the draining, those are things that I can learn to try to avoid. So hopefully you get the idea that the list is quite simple. One list is life-giving, one list is draining or depleting. And then you can check in. Some people light a candle in the evening and they just do a check-in every evening before bed. So then you can kind of take stock and start doing more of the things that are life-giving and fewer of the things that drain your energy. This will help you as you recover. When I was depressed last winter and I really wished I didn't have to continue living, it scared me. I usually have a sense of purpose, but I had lost that. I remembered what someone else wrote as I began to recover. If you reach a point where you don't want to live and you start to recover, you need to ask yourself what needs to change in your life. So I really took some time to take stock of things that had contributed to my anxiety and depression during those very rough months. I set about working on improving those discouraging things. For instance, MS makes my ability to organize things and keep up with housework really challenging. It affects that ability for me, it affects cognitive. And so one thing that we did was get a little help with some of the problem areas. Some friends, really kind friends of mine, started coming over once a week for a while, a retired couple. And they would just help us organize, because my husband's busy with his job. He has a stressful job at the hospital, although he works from home during COVID, and that may become permanent. But these friends would come, and just once a week, they would bring a meal. We'd have really fun fellowship together, and we'd get a lot done. Maybe we'd clean the garage, or we'd organize a room, or whatever. But that really made a big difference for me. So, looking at what isn't going well in your life, and that had been a source of anxiety and depression to me. When I was depressed, I was especially bad at housework, and I just couldn't keep up. And so I got really behind, and these people helped me dig out, basically. And that was really a huge blessing that God provided through this friends named Val and Steve. Also, as I thought about what else needed to change in my life, we had some dynamics in my marriage that were really discouraging to me and challenging. I love my husband, but we married late in life, and there's a lot of adjustments when you do that. And so we had to really look at what was going on in our communication, how things were going in our relationship, and how both of our needs were getting met or not being met in our home. So we've done a lot of work on those dynamics in our marriage and how we relate to each other, and our relationship's been strengthened. So this winter, we're going into the winter in a much better place. And so I just want to encourage you to take stock of your life. What is bothering you most? Who might be able to help you make some healthy changes in your life? Take baby steps at first. Just make any progress that you can and celebrate that. Remember that very turbulent flight that I experienced in a remote area of China a few years back. When the plane first started hitting that major turbulence, my stomach turned. I tensed up. People sat there with white knuckles. But that gentle, reassuring voice of the stewardess reminded me that things would be okay. Below those clouds, that big lake was still there, and the sun is always shining above the clouds. The pilot knew how to get us safely to our destination, and her reassuring words helped. So, what do you tell yourself, or what do you allow others to say to you that can be reassuring and helpful to you and remind you that you are going to get through this? So here's some thoughts on how to handle turbulence in your own mental health. You could speak to yourself, or if you can, find a friend to do something comforting with you, but speak to yourself in a tender, kind voice. Pay attention to your self-talk, in other words. Let God take good care of you and your loved ones during this rough patch. And make sure that the things coming in terms of the messages that your heart is receiving, are encouraging and life-giving, not depleting and draining. Personally, I'm strengthened when I spend time reading the Bible and meditating on God's promises. I always say to myself, stand on the promises of God and I'll meet you there. So also recognizing that the hard things that you're facing right now, these things will pass. My old friend, who's now no longer living, she used to say to me, "It came to pass, not to stay." So it's important. That's a good motto for turbulent times. Now, I want to just sum up some things that I think I'm paying close attention to in my own life. It's kind of just a little summary of my packing list for taking care of being proactive about mental health. I have made sure that I cultivated a good support network in my life during the time when I've been doing better. I returned to doing the things that I love. I'm working on writing my book that I think I mentioned it earlier. It's called Tenderly Transformed, and it's about how to deal with mental health in times of crisis. I need to do life-giving things that give my life a sense of purpose and meaning. And even if I don't make fast progress on things because of my health and other reasons, all I have to do is continue engaging with things that are life-giving. That's going to make the best difference in my own emotional stability. I also pay attention to sleep. For me, I found some supplements that made a difference. One, for instance, that my chiropractor recommended is called Pro-Cortisol Balance. And that's a supplement that helps with the body to process stress. Because cortisol and other hormones in your body really do impact sleep, especially at different stages of our life. I also have paid attention to, exercise. I'm going to swim. I've been doing physical therapy because I had some bad falls this year. And the physical therapy has strengthened me and it's helped me balance. And I want to just share a really quick little story as I kind of wrap up. At the physical therapy office here in Oregon, they specialize in neurological conditions and some of the things that people encounter as they age also. But I was really blessed to get to use their underwater treadmill. And so, water's great because if I fall, I don't hurt myself. It's the water supports you. And so in this warm, pleasant water, they have this underwater treadmill. And then they have in front of you, so it's maybe I don't know if the pool is like 15 feet long, but this underwater treadmill allows me to even almost jog under the water. And I used to be a runner before I got multiple sclerosis. And so for me, that's a very wonderful feeling to be able to jog or to run in the water. And then they put this, these jets, they put a current against me and they turn that on. And at first they just said, try to stand against the current and not lose your balance without holding on. So I did that. And at first I could barely do it. But gradually I found my center. I found my center of gravity and I was able to kind of hold my ground standing. And then they said, okay, now close your eyes. Well, that's extremely hard for those of us with MS because we don't have much balance to begin with or coordination left, or at least I don't. And so, but eventually I was able to get to where I could keep my balance with that strong current. And then they said, go ahead and walk. And so I did on the treadmill against the current. And eventually I was able to jog against the current. And I've gained strength. And that's the same kind of thing is true of mental health. We can gain strength and we can find our center of gravity. We can find the things that give our life balance and meaning. And that can help us to keep our balance during tough times. So as you look ahead to, or maybe you're in the midst of a really tough depression or anxiety, or you have a kind of a chronic mental health condition, I want to say, first of all, that I really empathize with you. It can be so tough and so disheartening to live with those conditions. But don't give up hope. You have something to offer this world. You were created for a reason, and your life has meaning. Depression dims that sense of meaning, but it's still there. I want to just share a really quick little story of a memory that I had. I was working in Eastern Oregon some years back, and I went over to do a training for professionals. But on the way home, my friend and I decided to drive across Mount Hood instead of going home the other way. So Mount Hood is a beautiful mountain. But we were on this road that it's from the Hood River area, basically, or that general area, or the Dalles, and then you can go over Mount Hood, coming back to the Willamette Valley. Well, I'm a photographer, so I saw this beautiful sight. I asked my friend who was driving at the moment, pull over, I want to get out with my camera. So I got out, and there's these roses right in the foreground, and it's on the edge of someone's property, but it's right by the road. These roses were right there, and then right behind the roses was Mount Hood in all its glory in the summertime. There was still some snow on the mountain, and it was just beautiful, and you got a very close-up, magnificent view of this beautiful mountain. So I got out and I was taking a picture, and this lady comes running out the door of her house, which was right there. You know, I was on the road next to her property, I'm sure. And and I thought, oh no, she's going to get upset with me for taking pictures. And so I looked at her, and she comes running out, and she looked excited, but she didn't look upset. And she says, I didn't know it was there. I didn't know it was there when I bought the property. It was a rainy day when I looked at the property with a realtor. I didn't know the mountain was right there. So she was just amazed and marveling with me at this incredible view. And she had been surprised by the beauty of that mountain that was right there. And I just want to say that there is stability. Like when I think about a mountain, that's a stable thing. Like for me, in my walk with God, my relationship with Christ, he's my rock. He's my stability, just like that mountain. And even when depression or health issues, in my case, even when those things obscure the view and we don't remember that that stability is right there, that magnificent beauty is right there. Maybe those clouds are covering the mountain and you don't know, you can't feel it anymore, that there's hope. I just want to remind you, there is always hope. And as long as you're alive, there's a reason and a purpose for you to be alive. It could be as simple as encouraging someone else. And that's the other really secret weapon I have, and that is to remember to think about others and cultivate relationships that are life-giving and find ways to bless other people. Yesterday, I stopped and saw an elderly friend on my way home from physical therapy. And she's experiencing some dementia, but she knew who I was. But a little later in the conversation, and she was just, as always, very delightful and happy to see me. I just love her. But after a while, she looked at me and she says, oh, I'm having some trouble right now. I can't remember right this minute. Who are you? And I thought to myself later, I thought, one of the keys to mental health is remembering who we are. Sometimes depression or anxiety or other things kind of cut us off from a sense of who we are. But our self-worth does not depend on our performance or other people's opinions. Our worth, our value is intrinsic. It's something that God created you as a unique person, and there's things that only you can offer this world. So as you create your own plan for wellness and how to cultivate emotional stability and resilience in your life, or how to recover from mental health challenges. All of you are familiar with, people say go to counseling. That's great. You can gain some helpful tools. Medications can be valuable, especially in some instances, they're very valuable. There may be natural things you can do. There may be dietary things you can do. But what I want to remind you today is don't forget who you are. In my own case, I had kind of cut off expression of the best parts of myself. The things that I love and are life-giving, I pulled back and didn't do those things enough. I didn't spend time with people very often. Well, we had the stay-home orders, and we're in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. So I guess many, many people kind of have experienced more isolation. Remember, don't cut yourself off from life-giving relationships. Even if you're hurting, find at least one person you can trust and open up to them. Also, cultivate your spiritual life. In my case, my walk with God is something that's extremely life-giving and important to me. During the time when I was depressed, I started to feel doubts that I normally don't experience about my faith. My friend was kind enough to say to me, "That's your depression talking. Remember what you know and who you are, and rest on the truth." And so I just want to encourage you that as you face different challenges with your mental health, just like in that airplane flying over that lake as we headed into Dali in Yunnan province, in those moments, I felt kind of a little terrified, to be honest. The plane was bumping all over the place. But that kind, gentle voice of the stewardess in her Chinglish, reassured my heart. And she just said, "We're going to get you safely to your destination, dear friends. It's going to be okay." And I just want to tell you, remind your heart that today. Thanks for taking time with me. And I really enjoyed the chance to visit with you. Also, I want to just mention a couple of resources that helped me. One of my friends during my rough time with mental health brought over her phone, and she showed me that there's a Christian meditation app called Abide Christian Meditation. There's a free version of it, and there's a paid version. But the free version has a lot of great resources on depression and anxiety. There's also a website called meditainment.com. And that website is valuable because it just gives you some visualizations. And again, there's a free version and a paid version, but the free versions help me get to sleep. It's just some guided imagery, no particular faith or spiritual meaning attached to it. It's just some nice guided imagery that helped me get to sleep and relax. Also, if you have underlying trauma history or unhealed wounds in your life, those things are going to be triggers that might cause you to spin out or struggle more with your mental health. Get some help in healing with those things if you can. So I just want to, as I think back on that memory of that woman who, she just wanted to share her amazement and utter wonder that she bought this property, not realizing this incredible view of the mountain was right there. And so I just want to remind you that your life might not feel like there's this beauty and wonder right there, but there is. It's still there, whether the clouds obscure it or not. Don't give up. Take care.